This past May, a little French animated film called Mars Express made its way into theaters and seemed to have slipped under everyone's radar. Albeit, it had a very limited release, thus it probably didn't get the chance to grab the attention of potential viewers. Since I'm a close follower of the company G-Kids, I was at the very least aware of the film's existence, since they had advertised it on their socials. Besides that, I hadn't seen much about Mars Express other than the trailer, so I had some idea of what the film was going to consist of, but not entirely. The film was released in North America on May 3rd, 2024, and released on home media just a little over a month later on June 18th, 2024. I wanted to catch this in theaters while it was there, but didn't get the chance to since, like I said, it had a very limited release. Fortunately, I was able to snag a Blu-ray recently at Barnes & Noble and watched it at home. Mars Express follows private investigators Aline Ruby and her partner Carlos Rivera as they pursue investigations involving android hackers. These cases would eventually find them uncovering a more malicious plot, pushing Aline and Carlos to try preventing it from coming to fruition.
Memory full or insufficient? Update cancelled.
They force you to update it every time I try. Memory full. Oh, sorry. Carlos Rivera. Hey.
Honestly, I feel like for the average person, this movie probably isn't all that eye-catching. The animation is unique, but it's something we're starting to see more often. What I mean by that is, some studios try to animate CGI in this sort of cel-shaded style, and they lower the frame rate to give it a more traditional looking effect. Sometimes it works, sometimes it makes it look too choppy and can be distracting. In the case of Mars Express, it's thankfully done pretty well. You can tell the frame rate is a little lower than usual, but it's not so low that it hinders the animation. I really appreciated that. The premise also isn't anything new. I've seen it been compared to Ghost in the Shell, which I can see, but I personally think it's more similar to the anime/manga Pluto with a little mix of Blade Runner. I'm probably making it sound generic right now, but what drew me in personally was the setting of the film. Mars. Mars as a setting almost always intrigues me. I don't know what it is, but the idea of seeing Mars already colonized and its own civilization fascinates me. Although Mars being the backdrop isn't necessarily what the film wants you to focus on. In fact, they rarely mention it. A major theme that the film explores is the treatment of androids in this world. Mars Express takes place in the 23rd century, so naturally, technology has advanced quite a bit, thus, androids. In this world in particular, there are people who advocate for the freedom of these androids, as they don't really have free will and are bound to the discretion of humans. And then there are people who don't like them or think much of them. As I said earlier, this isn't something we haven't seen before. I feel like Pluto and Blade Runner have similar themes, but perhaps go a little deeper than what is done in this film. That's not to say this film isn't interesting. I think the film still does enough to make itself distinct from others. Speaking of which, I wish they sort of explored the animosity towards androids a little more, because it's only really brought up in the beginning of the film and not really talked about again. And I think it would have been an interesting aspect to explore.
First colonists lived down here? I definitely don't think I could have. We're a lot better off under the domes, if you ask me. All right?
One thing I like is that the androids don't seem to know they are servants until a human jailbreaks them. Once they are jailbroken, it's as if they are being born. They don't know where they are, who they are, and are confused. It's kind of scary when you think about it from their perspective. For me, it begs the question of when should something be considered sentient, and if something has the capability of gaining sentience, is it wrong to keep them from it? The existence of android replicas is also something to consider, since they are technically human in a way. Android replicas are androids who I believe possess a consciousness of someone who has died, as one of our main characters is, Carlos. Something that they explored a little is that depending on who that person is in the previous life, they can have restrictions put on them just as any other android. For example, Carlos was said to have been a violent person who domestically abused his wife. But after he died and was made into an android, restrictions were put on him so he wouldn't be violent. The whole sentience discussion isn't really explicitly mentioned in the film though, but rather something I started to think about myself. I don't know if that's what the director intended, but it's some food for thought for me.
Get ready to smash the window!
What? Window?
Going back to the world for a second, I liked seeing how other technologies have been implemented into everyday life, specifically the neurochip device. Everyone seems to have it, and it looks to have replaced phones. I actually don't remember seeing a phone throughout the whole film now that I've mentioned it. Since everyone has this neural chip, they can basically have telepathic conversations with each other, or even Discord party calls in their minds. One scene that comes to mind is when Aline is going to a crime scene with one of her colleagues, and when she's looking around the crime scene, she catches all the investigators sort of giggling to themselves. She then nudges her colleague and asks, "Hey, what's so funny? Can I join the call? I want to laugh too." And he's like, "Oh yeah, let me just invite you." And it reminds me of an interaction you would have for a group chat or a Discord call. I thought it was a neat display of the tech anytime they used it. For a sci-fi crime film, the music was quite ethereal. Sure, it had its moments of more energetic tracks for the more action-packed scenes and chase sequences, but the light and airy piano tracks ended up being the music that stood out to me the most. To give you an idea of what it sounded like, it's pretty similar to the piano tracks from the TV series Scavenger's Reign. Unless you haven't seen that, then you probably don't know what I'm talking about. Since the music was pretty similar, I thought that maybe they would have had the same composer, but after a quick Google search, no, they didn't. One thing I wasn't expecting was how funny the film was. It's not an outright comedy, but it has subtle humor sprinkled in every now and then that feels very natural and relatable. I'd argue that the humor hit harder because I wasn't expecting it. That being said, the film's tone wasn't as serious or cerebral as I thought the trailer made it out to be. The relationship between Aline and Carlos tends to lighten the mood of the film, given the opportunity, but also knows when to go back to serious mode when it needs to. It's a nice balance. Although the film does go full on serious for the last 15 or 20 minutes. Anyways, I just wanted to quickly talk about this movie, as I don't really see it getting that much attention. It's nothing groundbreaking, but it's a good time for a movie night, especially if you want to watch something more obscure. But yeah, that's it. Okay, bye.